You have one of the toughest names that I think I've ever seen. Koen Lavrijssen, right? Is that close enough for an American?
So they're just giving it the best go.
Come up with the idea, and why did you get into the POS space?
I've been programming since I was 12. People were running into issues with the system that they were using at the time. Okay, Koen, you know how to program, right? Can't you just build a POS? Well, I guess I could try. Can you guys order me the hardware? And a couple months later, they had a working prototype.
The POS is complicated, and it comes down to user, can you use the tool effectively?
We've been in the market, we've been active in the market here in Europe for years now. We are seeing more and more that cover complex use cases. We need to make sure that we balance that with keeping that simplicity so that a new employee walks in and they're just able to start working with the system right away.
If that POS is overly complicated than a basic kind of cell phone, then you built something that's too complicated. How do we make it easy to use but powerful to deploy?
That we make sure that our engineers that are actually working on the product, that they either have some hospitality experience, get a sense of how it feels working with your own system, the POS or the dealer's responsibility to show a customer, a restaurant, how they can do something in a simpler fashion. Then I think the question for the restaurant should be, do I want to make this specific functionality where I want something custom? Is this really where I want to make my stand and do something different from all of the other people in the world?
Koen, I'm excited to have you on the podcast. Koen is the founder and CEO of Mr. Winston POS, and we're here to talk a little bit about Mr. Winston, also getting into a little bit about the guest experience. It's something I love to talk about. As you know, Omniboost, we work in integrations and data unification, and we have the core purpose to help our customers focus on their core purpose, which is delighting their guests, and it all falls back to hospitality of customer experience. So how the hell did you come up with the idea, and why did you get into the POS space and start a company called Mr. Winston POS? Talk to me about how you fell into this industry, because if I'm not mistaken, your background originally was in IT, right? You went to school, research, and then got into IT and consultancy. So how did you fall into hospitality?
Yeah, the hospitality bit was mainly because I was working in a restaurant at the time. And you are right in saying that I'm more of a techie. I've been programming since I was 12. Really haven't stopped since. I don't get to do it as much anymore as I would like to. Because I've got a great team here now that does most of that for me, with me. In the restaurant where I was working, I just noticed that people were running into issues with the system that they were using at the time. Basically, the thing that most people felt was that the system they were using was more in the way of their hospitality process than that it was actually contributing to it. So I remember one night, the manager, the chef, and me were having a drink at the bar after a busy day. And the manager had been running around the venue, linking his laptop to all the POS systems that were there and trying to reconfigure stuff and fixing stuff. And it just didn't work. The chef wasn't happy about how the tickets were coming in. I had to teach people like 3 times in the first week, and then they would still make 10 mistakes in the first couple of days. On how to use the system. So they were like, okay, Koen, you know how to program, right? Can't you just build a POS? And I told them, after taking a sip of my beer, I was like, well, I guess I could try. Can you guys order me the hardware? And that's what I did. And a couple months later, they had a working prototype.
So basically, comes out of frustration, a few drinks. And hey, just because you've been programming since you're 12, can you figure this out? And it's just like, sure, why not? And
a bit of frustration, a bit of naivety, I guess, as well. Just how hard can it be? Build a POS. It needs to be a couple of buttons on the screen. If you press one of those buttons, something ends up in a list. Press another button, it prints a ticket. I mean, that's the basics of POS. And it's still that, but it's way more complex. There's a lot of stuff behind it. But essentially, it's still that. It's a way for the people on the floor to convey the wishes of the guests to the people in production, like in the kitchen, behind the bar, and making sure that process is properly facilitated.
Yeah. And I think you make a great point there. And this is why I love talking about the guest experience is a POS is complicated. And there's a lot of stuff that is going, but at the end of the day, it needs to be simplistic enough in its user experience that you have, whether you're doing a quick service restaurant or a fine dining establishment or something in between, you have multiple people, multiple orders, and you've got to be able to do that fast and move people through because you make money based on turnover, ticket size, all these things. So if the user experience of a system is so hard to learn, which part of your frustration was you would teach people and they can't learn it, then be as powerful as it wants to be. But if it's not easy to use, I mean, we all know it's why we all still use Excel. There's other tools out there. Excel is complicated, but at the end of the day, everyone knows how to use Excel because it's a base program, and at its core, it's easy to use and then it has tons of functionality. We try to get away from Excel for years, and we still use Excel. And it comes
Yeah,
down to user, can you use the tool effectively?
definitely. Now, and as we're building out the product, because we've been in the market, we've been active in the market here in Europe for years now. I think the first version of the product was released in 2013, and so that's over 10 years in the market. Back then, it was just a hobby project, but as we're building out the product, you are seeing more and more that we need to cover complex use cases. But at the same time, all the time, we need to make sure that we balance that with keeping that simplicity so that people don't get confused by the system. I still want that system to be the same way as it was in the first version, that a new employee walks in and they're just able to start working with the system right away. I mean, I should be able to put someone without hospitality training. I should be able to pick them off the streets, put them in a restaurant and say, okay, this is the POS, good luck. And they should be able to work it out. That's our philosophy.
And I love that philosophy because most people have a cell phone, right? Have some sort of cell phone, smartphone. You don't see too many people with an old school Nokia flip phone or a Motorola Razor running around. If I do see somebody, I'm going to ask them like why, and I also kind of want it because that reminds me of growing up. But if you can navigate a smartphone and be able to open up Facebook or Instagram or book your flight on a whatever, and you can't operate a POS, like if the POS is overly complicated than a basic kind of cell phone usage, then you built something that's too complicated. So like I
Yeah.
love this idea of so anybody off the street should be able to like learn the POS in a quick amount of time to at least do the basics. Obviously, there's advanced features, and that's the hard part, right? You're developing a system that needs to be complex on the back end with data, insights, mapping, all these things, but needs to be used every day, multiple times a day, hundreds of button clicks a day, well, virtual button clicks on the touchscreen a day. How do you balance that? And obviously, when you built this out of frustration, you thought about this in the front hand, but as you continue to evolve the product over years, what's that trigger for you to always keep that in mind of like, how do we make it easy to use but powerful to deploy?
I think that the single most important thing that we do to make sure that we keep on delivering that same value is that we make sure that our engineers that are actually working on the product, that they either have some hospitality experience or I work hospitality experience into them. So last year, I went with a couple of engineers from our team. I went to go work myself at one of our clients. I just went over there, and a day I was working in the kitchen behind the bar, serving tables, just doing that stuff that I used to do. Also because I really, I had been out of it for quite a couple of years now, and it's just good to feel how it, to get a sense of how it feels working with your own system. And they were basically just running after me through the venue and typing out stuff, maybe even fixing stuff as they were seeing me do stuff. They're like, okay, this it's going to be easier if we change this interaction into a shorter interaction because now it takes you a lot of time all the time. So I think making sure that we keep really close to the people in the actual restaurant, I think that's the most important thing that we can do there. But another thing is also POS systems can be very complex. But if you make sure, I mean, it's also the customer sometimes asking complexity, but sometimes it's also the POS or the dealer's responsibility to show a customer, a restaurant, how they can do something in a simpler fashion.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, restaurants all over the globe are very similar. I mean, every restaurant is unique, but they are very similar. And I think if you can kind of create a baseline level of functionality that covers most of the use cases, then I think the question for the restaurant should be, do I want to make this specific functionality where I want something custom? Is that my pure differentiator in the market? Is this really where I want to make my stand and do something different from all of the other people in the world? Or is that something else? Is it my food? Is it my the venue, the lighting, the music, the people visiting? Um, and yeah, I think a lot of times there's another answer than doing something difficult in the POS.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that's really cool that you still take time to go work at the customer location using your software, using your tools to really understand process improvement. I think that is important, and it's easy for us to easy for us. I say it's easy for tech to build a solution, right, to a problem. And usually, in theory, that's good, but in practicality, that's where a lot of issues with technology becomes overly done. It's why everyone talks about user experience testing when you deploy new technology, right? It needs to be, unless it's a back end script or something running. If it's using front end, it needs to be thought of from a human interaction perspective, and the amount of time and care that you put into that really shows through. And that was something that I've always liked about your story. And I've had the pleasure of talking to you a few times about this. So I wanted to highlight that because it does, I think, make it really stand out of how Mr. Winston is being deployed across across as you grow markets, right? You've been in Europe for a while now. You're now expanding markets quickly, rapidly, growing quick. So, um, talk to me a little about that piece of it, right? Because the way you go to market, you have a very unique thought process on the dealer mentality and how you really want to drive growth with partners, growth with your team. So, talk a little bit about your kind of methodology on how Mr. Winston is going to new markets moving forward as we look at 2025.
When we started to scale relatively early, and then I'm talking like 2017, um, we noticed that we were developing a product, we were marketing the product, we were selling it, we were implementing it, we were supporting it, we were getting feature requests that went back into development and selling more and more and more. And our company was just being drawn into every direction. And it was pretty much impossible us to keep on scaling like that. So we looked into the market and we saw that some other competitors were employing a dealer model, a value-added reseller. Doesn't really matter how you want to call it, a partner model. But basically, they were working together with, I'll call them dealers for this discussion, who would buy the hardware, get a license to the software, combine it with the man hours of their people, and then deliver a complete package to the restaurant. And I really believe that that's the only way that it's ever going to properly work for decent restaurants. Because those restaurants want to have someone that they can ask for advice before they start an implementation, but also call for support if something goes wrong or there's something with the hardware. And that person needs to be near. And it's impossible for us to scale to such a size that we are near everyone and can provide that level of service. And I don't think a lot of the large industry players who aren't working with a dealer model that they can actually provide that service. So for us, really, POS as a total package is like 50% software, the other 50% is the dealer, because the whole product consists of the software combined with the service and the hardware all put together.
So I think that's really cool, and it's interesting you bring that up because obviously working at Omniboost and working with our partners, we see how all these play out and have resellers that bring in things and do things within the partner channel. And it is unique, right? Because I think at the end of the day, when you're deploying a new system, especially at the restaurant level, you want localization. You want somebody that you can trust to recommend the best software, best hardware, best support methodology, be there close to be able to be there to train you and help you out. And you look at some of the bigger players, while they do a good job at having key people in key markets, you kind of choose which markets that you want to dive into. And there's some markets that you can't, versus with a dealer reseller model, you can really find people who can handle different markets and go deeper and really have that localization. So you're giving that globalization and localization to your customers to really leverage the power of the system. So I think it's a really cool methodology for growth.
Definitely. Now, we basically have two types of partners as well, right? You briefly touched upon it just now, the integration partners as well. So we have dealer partners, but also integration partners. And our philosophy there is the same. I mean, it's impossible to be the best at everything. Anyone that's going to tell you they're the best at everything, they're just talking, well, crap, basically.
Yeah.
And so what we do with integration partners as well is that, okay, we say, we have this whole hospitality suite available, right? So Winston is not just POS; it's also kitchen displays. It's also online ordering. It's QR ordering. It's a reservation system. There's a whole suite to it. But at the same time, we also partner with reservation systems. We also partner with kitchen display systems. Not because, no, yeah, well, we mainly do that because some customers may have maybe okay with just our own version of that module, but a lot of customers will want more, and they are right to want more. But if they are going to ask us to develop in all of these directions again, so that's the company story again, where the company is being run in all directions, but the same applies to the product. If we allow ourselves to be moved in all of those directions, and basically the average quality of the whole product will go down. You will have a bigger product, and the partners will not be happy because then you're competing with them. And I'd rather work together with them because together we can deliver a great experience to the restaurant on both, for instance, KDS and POS.
I love that. I think that's really, really impactful and important. And I think it's also great that there's this mentality because you're right. A lot of people think they can do everything. And yeah, you could probably learn to do everything, but you don't need to do everything because all that does is stretch you thin from being really good at what you do best
Yeah.
and focusing on what do we do better than anybody else? What is our core product, core offering? And how do we offset that with great partners and the likes to really drive the best experience, the best product to market, and the best overall product that can be on the market?
And in every module or part of the product, it's so easy to overlook what seems like minor peculiarities of the hospitality process, right? So an example that I always use is inventory. In a lot of businesses, inventories is just going to be correct. But in hospitality, in pretty much any hospitality business, inventory is never going to be correct because someone dropped something or didn't register something or took something to drink for himself. And so what we build in there is that a lot of systems, if you're out of inventory, they will force you to not being able to order something. So let's say you're out of bottles of Coke, you won't be able to sell that. What we do is we give a notification. Well, actually, we give you the option now, so you can choose whether you get a notification or it's disabled. But our basic implementation is a notification like this product is out of stock, but you can still order it because maybe that crate of Coke came in the morning and the manager didn't put it into the system yet. And then you have a customer that wants the Coke. That's the experience they are asking for. You have it standing there right in front of you, but you cannot order it on your POS. That's the kind of stuff that gets in the way. And this is, I mean, there's so many of those small bits in POS that you just have to think through properly. And the same applies for KDS, the same applies for online ordering and reservations. And I think it would just be grandeur if we were to say, okay, we can be the best at all of those. We are going to find each and every one of those and do something great there. Yeah, I just don't think that's possible. I don't think it's realistic.
I agree. And that was a great example with like simple Coke, right? Things happen so fast that if deliveries get delayed or not there, or they come in a little late, right as the restaurant kicks in full gear, it's really easy to forget to add to update something so that you can actually sell it. And it's like you have product here, you have an experience that the customer wants, and you can't do anything about it. That's mental, right?
I think the whole restaurant business is one of the most by definition unstructured, chaotic businesses that there is. And it's really difficult to at the same time provide a solution that brings enough structure so that you can get to work easily and then everything runs like clockwork, but not too much that you're getting in the way. So you
Yeah.
need to be super structured but super flexible at the same time. And I think that's really difficult to combine those two.
Yeah, I really think hospitality in all phases, restaurants to hotels to travel, it's chaos and motion, right? Because it needs to be flexible enough to move and shake with the highs and lows. You can do all the planning you want. Because I used to work at a all you can eat pizza buffet, right? And in the summertime, we would always know when the high times were, like when and it would be slow the rest of the time. But during the summer, if it rained, we knew we were about to get slammed because everybody's pool day, everybody's amusement park day just changed to because we had a game room. Now, well, we're gonna go to the pizza buffet. We're gonna spend 3 hours there and go play, get the kids games and go play. So we'd get slammed, and you can't prep for that. I mean, yes, you can look at the weather um, forecast, but you know that meteorologists are wrong most of the time. So you don't want to make, prep for, something like way over and then not have it because then you have to count that all as a loss and that's wasted product. So you have to kind of balance that out. And so there's times like as soon as we start seeing it pour down random, it's like, all right, we need to start now in the middle of the rush. Like we're gonna get slammed again. We need more, we need faster. And that's a whole process. So I love that hospitality is chaos in motion, but there's also ways that you have to put the process and protocols in place that you can also quickly adjust to that chaos in motion. And it's such a unique way of doing business. Um, but also it's kind of a thrill. Like I remember, I don't know if you ever think about it, like sometimes we're working in tech jobs and obviously I love it, but some days I'm just like, man, I kind of miss the chaotic craziness of working on a frontline food service job and just how much fun I had cooking as a cook, as a line cook for a pizza restaurant and working the buffet and talking to people and just, the huge rush and then it slows down and then it picks up again. And I sometimes miss just that, like that excitement and that craziness of chaos.
Definitely. I think it's hospitality is one of the working in hospitality is one of the most stressful jobs, but also rewarding in a certain sense. I mean, uh, personally, I used to really enjoy making sure that everything was prepared properly, and then there would be a big rush coming in, and you could handle that. Like you as one person would be handling an amount of people coming in that would normally require like three people to be behind the bar or something. Because you had everything properly set up, you can manage it. And then if you do that, if everything is running like clockwork because you're being clever about your inventory and stuff like that, then you have time extra to make sure that you're watching out for the guests and checking whether their experience is actually going all right. Because to me, hospitality, restaurant business isn't about food. It's not about drinks. It's about an experience, right? I mean, you have drinks and food in the fridge at home, and you're still going out to have dinner somewhere. Either to grab a quick bite because you're on the road, or because you want to have a nice experience with your partner, with some friends going out. And I think if the business is running like clockwork and a POS can be supportive in that, I'm not going to say that we are going to guarantee you that because it needs to be the people working together with the system in order to make sure that everything does run like clockwork. Um, but if it's going like that, and I remember when I was working in a restaurant, it was going like that for us. I mean, we had implemented a POS. I was happy with how it was going. And I had some time extra, and I was just looking through the restaurant, and I saw a woman sitting there, and she was just a couple of times like, she was like, "There's something wrong there. There's definitely something
Yeah.
wrong there." And then you can evade that, and you can try to say, "No, I'm not going to approach her because it's going to be an issue." I walked up to her and I said, "Hi, is everything all right here?" No, of course, not everything was all right. We were waiting for the main dish, and it was taking longer than expected. So I was like, "Okay, what I'll do, I'll check with the kitchen right now, and on the way back, can I bring you guys some complimentary drinks?" And just by doing that, because I had some time to spare because things were running as I wanted them to run, I was able to turn that negative experience into a great experience because they were working on in the kitchen on the dish already. So I could tell them it's going to be out in a couple of minutes. I'll bring your drinks to you, and those were happy customers leaving the venue. You wouldn't have to be been able to do that if you were slammed all the time and backed up and yeah, resolving problems where some table was moved to another table, so the drinks ended up on the wrong table, and nobody knows where to bring this tray of food. Yeah, it's everything needs to tie into each other in order to enable those experiences.
Yeah. I love that. And it is impactful because you also think about, I always laugh when you go into a restaurant during an off hours and you wait longer than normal for food because they're not focused on cooking. And so maybe there's not as much food already ready. Like they're cooking it fresh. And so sometimes things happen because when you're cooking during the rush, you're cooking a lot of things in motion and there's a lot of heat. So things can just move. And so it's making that experience the best possible and being able to leverage those things and having the tools to support that. Because the flip side of this, all this stuff is, and yes, there's the human element. There's never going to change that human element, but our tools and our systems can be set up for us so that we can have more time to focus on the human element. And that's essentially what our systems do, right? Integrations that Omniboost builds, the POS that Mr. Winston builds is all meant to give those employees who utilize that system every day more time to focus on making sure their guests are well taken care of and there for the experience. Because yeah, you go out to a bar and pay $10 for a beer when we can drink $2 beers at home, but we still go spend the $10 for a beer at the bar anyways, right?
Yeah, exactly. What you just said. So I think that whether it's the tools or simplifying your business that allow you to get some time left as a hospitality entrepreneur or as a manager to think about how you want to strategically position your business. And that sounds like a little bit too much management jumbo, but I do think you should be thinking about what sets you apart as a restaurant from the other restaurants. And in my opinion, that most of the time that tends to be the guest experience. And food or drinks can be guest experience, right? If someone is going to a wine bar, then the type of food is something that sets them apart from something else. But the experience itself and how the people in the venue are servicing you, I think that's something that's often overlooked. And personally, I like to visit and revisit venues where something out of the ordinary happens. And out of the ordinary doesn't have to be over the top. But I personally don't want a restaurant that's like three course standard meal and we will do everything perfect. I like if they're mixing things up a little. And it doesn't have to be all out there. I believe in the US you have this restaurant chain where they shout at you or they curse at you. It doesn't have to be that, but make it something special. And I think that should
Yeah.
be something that yeah, restaurants can focus on a lot more.
So you literally were flying my train of thought because I was about to say, the experience piece of it. There, we now have restaurants where they give you a bad experience. We go for the bad experience. Partly, I think it's such a novelty because it reminds you of what a good experience should be like, or what a normal experience should be like, right? Because I think it's crazy when we think about experiences and that we go to restaurant chains that give us bad experiences, but it's all part of the experience, right? And I agree. The experience is a really important piece, and it's something that you need to hone in on, and that's what makes the difference. And all the tools that could give you the ability to give the customer the experience they came into that restaurant for, that's the game changer. And that's where the difference really needs to be. And I know that's something you care a lot about because we've been talking about it for the last half hour. And it's also why you built a POS system, working at a restaurant at the bar to to now where you are today. It's all based with that in mind, and that kind of shines through. I want to transition because there's a lot of things we're talking about. 2025 is right on the horizon. This will actually drop. It'll probably be early 25. What are you most excited for about 25, for the business, for the industry, just in general as it relates to Mr. Winston and the stuff that y'all are working on?
Yeah, our whole team at this moment, including me, the thing we're most excited for is our launch in the US. So over the past couple of months, we've been working together with a couple of dealers there in order to bring our product to the market. They've given us a shit ton of feedback on the product to make sure that it's properly suited for the US process. For instance, yeah, the way that payments and tipping works in the US is completely different to what happens in the European Union. But that's something we had to build into the system, and for us it was like mind-boggling how it works over there. Like, do you really have to print a ticket and then hand a credit card, and then they bring you another ticket and then put a tip on it, and then they go enter it at the end of the night? Yes, that's really what they do.
Yeah.
It's just a huge surprise for us. Well, not in the past month, but when we started to work on
Yeah.
that. So I think for me the major thing to look out for, we're aiming on launching on the 1st of February. So in January we're still doing some pre-launches with some customers. So we already have some customers running the system in the US, making sure that it's all set up for the taxes, but mostly making sure that the process is properly implemented as US restaurants expect it to be implemented. Because that's the thing what made us successful here in Europe, and that I believe is also going to be the thing that makes us successful in the US. Making sure that when someone uses our system, they get this feeling of, oh, finally a system that works with me instead of against me. And
Mhm.
if I can convey that feeling to people using the system, then I'm happy.
I love that. I think that is like the cherry on top, right? The bow on the present is that feeling of a system that works with me, not against me. And so many times in so many industries, we build tools to solve problems. In theory, they work well, but they work against the user at every step of the way and make it so tough. And I love that we come back
You
to that
don't,
simple message, you know?
yeah, you don't want to have that computer says no scenario where you're like, man, I'm in a rush here trying to help these people get along, and that, ah, yeah,
Yeah.
that frustration.
Yeah, well, that's I love that we're fixing that. I'm excited for the for y'all's launch in early next year and all the prep that goes into it. I know it's a lot, so really excited to see how that continues to drive forward for y'all. Um, as we close out, Cohen, how do we get in touch with you? If somebody's interested in learning more about Mr. Winston or wants to get in touch with you, where do they find you? How do they get in touch with you to learn more?
They could definitely take a look on our website. It's winstonpos.com. So we're rebranding actually also from Mr. Winston into Winston. That's a change that's also going to happen in the first quarter of the next year. And you can also always drop me an email personally. It's just Koen, with the weird pronunciation, at winstonpos.com.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to put that in the show notes to the website and the email if you want to get in touch with Kuhn. Definitely do and learn more. I am excited that it's going to be Winston Pause because whenever I try to type in MrWinston.com, doing Mr. Winston without the period after Mr. is always hard to forget. Like it's just natural to always type it like properly. So excited for that. Really appreciate you taking the time to jump on. I love this conversation and the simple messaging of a system that works with me, not against me. So excited to see all the things you have in store as you continue to grow and scale. And we appreciate you being a partner with Omniboost and the stuff that we get to do together and work on and chat about. So really appreciate all of that. And thanks for joining the show. Of
Thanks a lot for having me, Rob.
course, all those out there, this has been another episode of Hospitable. If you could be a tier one, like, rate, subscribe, review, do all the things. And until next time, stay well.